Well, hey, everyone. Matt, we've got a really cool show today. Taylor Thompson is our guest, and commodity marketing specialist probably doesn't do justice to how much info this guy's got in that brain of his.
Yeah, this was an interesting conversation. This is not my wheelhouse, but he's got a lot of great knowledge. He talks it down to my level, we'll say that. And I thought it was a really interesting conversation. What an awesome resource for folks Kentucky Farm Bureau has here with Taylor. So yeah, I think our audience is really going to like this.
We're excited for you guys to hear it. So without further ado, I'm Renee Carrico.
And I'm Matt Hilton.
And this is Between the Rows. Thanks for being with us, Taylor.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Good morning. This is going to be a fun day. We are going to learn a lot about you and about some resources we've got. So I want to start out as a couple of Kentucky born and raised people sitting here as your host. We got to hear about it. How did a Tennessee boy get to Kentucky?
I'm very excited to be here with you all. So I want to say first off, Matt, Renee, thank you so much for having me. That's a great question. How did someone from Tennessee end up in Kentucky? So I guess I'll start off just kind of with my background and where I came from and what ultimately brought me here. So to start, originally from Columbia, Tennessee. If you're on 65, roughly an hour south of Nashville. So that was where I was born and raised down there. If you see the county, you'll probably pronounce it Maury County, just so everyone who's listening knows it is Murray County. So you might see it as Maury, but it's in fact Murray. So that's the county that I was born and raised in. After that, so I graduated high school, and after that, I actually went to play football right out of college. Going into college right out of high school. So I played for about 2.5 years, had a pretty serious knee injury, which ended my football career. From there, I went to the University of Tennessee, so I transferred out and went to the University of Tennessee, and there was really where I kind of fell in love with the agribusiness space and the ag econ space, and ended up majoring with a degree in food and agribusiness from the University of Tennessee. And from there, I went to Purdue University, and that's where I got my master's in ag econ. Graduated in August of 2022. And so to get back to what we talk about, a Tennessee boy who went to Arkansas, back to East Tennessee, then up to Indiana. What brought me here to the state of Kentucky was the opportunity to work in the supply chain for Yum Brands. The affiliate co-op, its name is Restaurant Supply Chain Solutions, which is located here in Louisville. And so I actually came to the area to work for them in August of 22. And so that's what brought me here to Louisville ultimately before transitioning, and now I'm here at the Kentucky Farm Bureau.
So Columbia, Tennessee, isn't the Tennessee Farm Bureau kind of there?
That is correct. Yes.
So why didn't you go to the Tennessee Farm Bureau?
Because we got him first, Matt.
We got him first, yeah. No, so back to home. What is your real background? Why did ag econ really, make you go into this type of business?
Yeah,
what was it about that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And so for the Tennessee Farm Bureau, it's actually pretty interesting. My father actually worked for the Tennessee Farm Bureau for about 10 years when I was younger, and so that was some of my initial interaction with the Farm Bureau. And he certainly enjoyed his time there. But transitioned when I was a little bit older. I was probably around the age of 11 or 12. He transitioned and began working for the University of Tennessee's Middle Tennessee Research and Education Center. So that location's in Spring Hill, just north of Columbia, actually right on the line right there. And what that operation includes is the Spring Hill location is just over 1,200 acres. And so it's a research farm. And so Renee might talk a little bit about her background. That's actually something that was an interesting connection.
We're research farm babies.
That's correct. That's correct. And so when you have a research farm, of course, the research is being done for the work, the professors up in Knoxville. And so essentially on that research farm, we did anything from row crops to forages to beef cattle. And so what that includes is corn, soybeans, wheat, and then you'd have various grass that you'd grow for cattle production. things like looking at mixtures of clover and fescue, for example, or having various crabgrasses, things like that are being grown for cattle production. And, of course, the beef operation, which included the bull test station, which is there, heifer development. They have included a stocker operation now as well. And so as well as the cow-calf operation that's there. So that was all what went into the operation. So I was very blessed to be able to grow up and work there. So it was a really neat perspective when I was young, and it was really neat to grow up and be around that environment.
I mean, is that where the heart of your love for agriculture, is that where it was kind of grown, or where did that come from?
Agriculture has been something that's been in my family for generations. It's really been central to my family's legacy, not only on my father's side, where, for instance, my dad grew up on really the last commercial feedlot in the state of Tennessee that my granddad at the time operated and ran and managed. But also my mother, too. It's been core to – she was actually the second female state president, FFA state president in the state of Tennessee. So that was a little bit of my mother's background. And so her getting to work from an FFA standpoint, as well as teaching ag in the classroom, actually for the Tennessee Farm Bureau for many, many years. I could remember my brother and I, she packing us up in the summertime, and we were on the road throughout the state, her teaching ag in the classroom. It's really been core to my family, like I said, for generations, and the upbringing and being around it, and being around the people that are involved, and seeing what it means not only to the individual but for the community. It's really been core to who I am and who I've become and what I've grown to be. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah.
So I'm going to jump forward a little bit. Well, one, you had a very good basketball tournament with your alma maters this year. So as a Louisville, UK, and LSU fan, I mean, we're going to have to go ahead and mention that. We laughed in the office over and over, Matt. Every time anybody got knocked out, by gosh, two of his alma maters were still in.
That's right. I tell people, since I moved here to Louisville, I'm actually here in the state of Kentucky, I'm everybody's favorite. So for the UK fans, I'm a University of Tennessee graduate. And for the Indiana fans that are in this area, I'm a Purdue graduate. So I'm very popular, as you could imagine, in this area. Yeah.
No, but jump into Louisville. I think it's so intriguing to learn more about what you did working with Yum Brands. I think a lot of us just know we go to concerts there, or we know what brands they're covering, but I don't think we really understand the scale with which Yum Brands is. It's such a cool perspective you have working there.
Sure. I'm going to jump right into that. But let me just briefly segue to say that as I was moving here to Louisville, I want to give a quick shout out to the Kentucky Farm Bureau, because little did my family and I realize the impact of the Farm Bureau. We actually moved here in Louisville, and so as I was looking for an apartment to move down, I found a location, and it turns out that the location that I moved in the apartment when I first moved here is actually right next to the headquarters. So when we came up, I actually had an old couch that my parents were going to bring me so I could move in and have a little bit of furniture. So we actually brought it up in our horse trailer, and we don't know where in the world we're going to park this thing. And so, well, we thought, well, there's a Farm Bureau next door. Surely they'll help us out. We walked right in. They were great. You all were great. Brought us in. Yeah, you can go ahead and park it out back. So we parked our horse trailer out there and had a spot overnight. So I thought that was a funny story.
It was all part of the plan.
We reeled him right in.
Yeah.
Let's say little did I know that was the start of it. But I thought I would share that briefly. That Farm Bureau has been excellent to me from the start. But Renee, back to what you were talking about. Yum Brands. What exactly is an outfit like Yum Brands? What do they do? So it's like you had mentioned. We see the big concert arena where the Cardinals play basketball. You see the brand names. You see Taco Bell. You see KFC, and you see Pizza Hut. So it's a really unique structure in terms of Yum Brands and how they work. So a way to think about it is Yum Brands is really the parent company of those brands that are mentioned. And so those brands include Taco Bell, KFC, Pizza Hut, and Habit Burger Grill, which is a West Coast group. And so you may have remembered A&W as an outfit that was actually under the Yum brand alongside Long John Silver's. So those two groups are actually no longer under the umbrella. But a way to think about it is there's the parent company, which is Yum Brands, which is kind of over all of the individual brands. And then those brands, Taco Bell, KFC, they operate independently. They're their own companies. And so working for Restaurant Supply Chain Solutions, what they are is a co-op. So particularly for the supply chain. So all the supply chain work for Yum as a whole, as well as the brands individually. They take care of all the supply chain work. So securing the raw materials, making sure it gets to the stores, and working with the franchisees to make things as smooth as possible. So when I moved down to Louisville, my position was to work as a commodity analytics manager for Restaurant Supply Chain Solutions under the Yum umbrella. Okay, and so what that meant essentially was I was a part of the team, which at the time was actually just my boss, so I was the second member of our team. We were tasked with working in the marketplace to secure the raw material and to hedge against price risk that was in the market for all of the brands that Yum was responsible for. And so to give you an idea of some of the scope of what we were looking at, Yum is actually the largest restaurant brand in the world. And in terms of the raw material that's purchased, probably the top competitor to Yum, which may do even a little bit more volume, is McDonald's. So in terms of the raw material, when I say raw material, corn, soybean oil, beef, pork, these things, chicken. Think about what you might consume, wheat. These are the things that are purchased. So when you really think about in the QSR, which is the quick service restaurant industry, when you think about the top two competitors in terms of scale and volume, you're really looking at Yum and McDonald's. So in terms of procuring raw material in the marketplace. So it's a little bit of kind of the Yum spectrum and what I moved originally when I moved to Kentucky, what I was here to do.
Yeah, that's a big impact, what they, I would guess, do and decide. Is that?
Yeah, you're exactly right. So at RSCS, we work typically with the U.S. market. So the markets that were here in the U.S. and did work to in part with some of the South American countries as well. But Yum has really a global impact. You actually have a Yum China Holdings, which individuals might be familiar with. That's actually a different group. So Yum is a huge conglomerate, Yum itself, but you also have Yum China. So products in KFC and Pizza Hut that's actually over in China and working in these outside markets, outside of the U.S. markets, I mean. And so that's an idea of kind of pretty much any country you go to, you're going to see a KFC or you're going to see a Taco Bell or a Pizza Hut. So in terms of the impact and kind of the unique perspective for me, which was really eye-opening, was when you see a product like corn or soybeans or wheat, all right, when you see it from the production standpoint, you really get the insight. Or you think about what? You think about your operation, right? And you think about how your product, what am I going to sell it for? I know what I've got in the product, all right? What am I going to sell it for? But the unique perspective for me was to see it from the end user standpoint, right? Was to see when these products were here in the market and the price volatility that was at play. Ultimately, the objective was to secure stable prices, or to put it more clearly, was to keep prices stable for the franchisees, right? Because when you think about your menu, you don't want to go to Taco Bell, all right, and one day you pay $4 for a taco, and then the next day you pay $8, and then you go and then you pay $2.50, and then you pay $10, but you don't like that fluctuation. So you want to keep prices stable over the long run so the consumer has an idea that they go to these restaurants and they know what they get. So as well as the extremely tight margins that these groups operate of, it's a very competitive standpoint. It's a very competitive industry, so the margins can often be difficult. So yeah, from an end user standpoint, to see these commodities that we grow here in Kentucky, for instance, to see it at the end user standpoint and from a global perspective was really eye-opening, especially the scale at which we secured that product.
So when you're looking at these, and I know we're making you put on your Yum hat for a little while here, but just to understand the scale, I mean, when we, like as a beef producer, we think getting to the farmer we're finishing some steers,
Right.
So we're looking at, right under 1,000 pounds of meat.
Right.
When it comes to product, what were the biggest products you were securing?
Yeah.
Just from just to give people a perspective, or who are your biggest competitors? Who are you watching that could move the market right there with you at Yum?
Yeah, it's actually really interesting. That's a good question, because when you think about markets, and this is going to be something maybe we can talk about a little bit later, you have to think about them holistically, I think people would argue. And what I mean by holistically is you got to think about the entire marketplace rather than, all right, corn. All right, let me look at the USDA report. I'm going to look at what corn price does, and I'm going to look at weather. And that's all that I'm going to look at. One thing that I learned in my time there was you really have to take a holistic perspective when it comes to the markets. What's going on in broader markets? What's going on with inflation? What's going on with interest rates? All right, what's going on with demand, let's say, out of China? What's going on with production in Brazil? You have to create and form a market narrative. And that was something that was really interesting to see, so that when you're evaluating products from a market standpoint, pretty much traders in the market, participants in the market, to sum it up, they really create a narrative, and then they act on that narrative, whether it's discretionarily, so whether that maybe, I got a gut feeling, so I'm going to secure price here, or algorithmically, to think, okay, I actually have equations, I have computers, I have these machines, in other words, that I type in my equations, all right, and they operate in the market based off of essentially the movements that I've programmed in. So the movements and the price taking, all right, and that's the algorithmic function. But essentially, it's taking a market narrative, and then it's moving with that market narrative, and then it's structuring your trades or your hedges to accommodate that. And so, to your point back for Yum, those markets that we would pay the most attention to, probably number one would be poultry. We actually had a poultry purchasing team that was their purpose. Their purpose was essentially whether you got a bucket or whether you got nuggets or tenders. That was what they were tasked with, was securing that product. But really, from a market standpoint, things like beef and things like oils, which people don't think a lot about. Think about your cups that you get, dipping sauces. What do you have to fry that chicken in, right? So the oils. So when you think about your proteins and your oils, really big buys from my time there. So yeah, that's a little bit about from the scale and the way that you think and the way that you evaluate. That's a little bit about kind of how we did things.
Coming and transitioning to Farm Bureau, your role now, how would you describe your role, and how do you take some of those experiences, something so big? I don't want to say you're minimizing it down to kind of what we do, but like how do you take all that information and discern it out for farmers today, and what does this role look like today for you?
Yeah, man, that's a great question. And I'll share a story while I was working for Yum. There was a program that I wanted to introduce. It was called the Producer Connect program, and essentially what that program was I would reach out and have conversations with agriculture producers, so row crop farmers, beef cattle farmers, and just have a conversation with what they were seeing on the farm. And I would take that information and I would look to relay that with my boss, with those of interest within the company about what was going on. And when I initially started that meeting, essentially what we did was I would get information from what they're seeing, all right, weather conditions, their livestock outlook, things like that, things that they evaluate. What are they buying seed for? What's fertilizer price looking like? These types of things, and I would share with them, okay, how I was thinking about markets, and it turned out to be something that I just thoroughly enjoyed, was speaking with those producers as a part of that program. And it was very brief, but we would actually set up a monthly meeting, and that turned into something that I just looked forward to each and every month. And so one way I like to think about my job here is I get to take what I did once a month and I get to do it every day, right? I get to speak with producers here in the state of Kentucky about what they're doing, about why it's important, and about how I'm thinking about markets. And here's the thing too, when it comes to markets, the fun thing and the not so fun thing in a lot of situations is nobody knows what's going to happen with price. And so I get to speak to farmers. I get to hear what they're thinking. And if they want, then they get to hear kind of what I'm thinking about things. I think that's the fun part about it, because I don't have all the right answers. And like I said, nobody does. But the great thing is you get to interact with wonderful people, and I get to share with them from my perspective how I'm seeing things. And then hopefully they give some feedback, and then we can talk. They give some feedback, and then we can talk through what's going on. But essentially what my job is to work on behalf of the farmers here in Kentucky, our membership, talk to them about markets and to just try to work with them as a member benefit, serve them even beyond markets, however I can, especially as a part of our commodities division team, how I can work with them to drive that net farm income, right, to be as profitable as possible.
So for those that maybe aren't as familiar with the commodity group here at Farm Bureau, which commodities do you specifically are you the point guy for? Because there's quite a few of you. So which group would you be, always see Taylor in the back of a meeting being that kind of ex officio guy in that committee? Right.
For me, it will be our grain crops. So we think about our crops such as corn, soybeans, and wheat. Will also be for our tobacco producers as well, and for the forestry side, so our forestry folks. So those are kind of the three main buckets that I fall into in terms of the commodities that I serve for the state.
Cool. Yeah. I'm a videographer here at Farm Bureau. Been here forever, and I really want to echo that idea of it's neat to do what you do for really good folks.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And I think that my job's different than yours. Renee's job's different. Everybody has different roles here. But that hits home over and over again. I hear so many people just say that, to get to do the thing I like to do here with really good people to help them as much as you can. Yeah, I'm just making a video or doing a podcast or whatever, but I think that's an important part, right?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And it kind of goes back to the original question, agriculture has impacted each of us at some level, right? And so the individuals that I've been around for the majority of my life, and the difficulty that agriculture production brings and the type of lifestyle that it requires is one that is like I mentioned, it's something it's difficult, but it's, I think, for anyone that has a farm that gets to produce products, it's an incredible blessing and something that people feel, farmers and producers, they feel so fortunate to be able to do. And that's something that when you work around these folks with the perspectives that they have, it makes working a pleasure. And it makes you want to work hard because the type of people that you're working around. For a lot of these folks, the kind of morals and the kind of ethics and how they do things and the constant pursuit of being the best steward of their land they could be. And ultimately when it comes down to it, when we think about something like stewardship's something that it really works in two ways. You work to be the best steward because you want to take care of your animals. You think about livestock, right? You're a good steward because you care about your animals, right? You want to put the best crop in the ground because you care about the land that you're working with, right? But also on the back end, that oftentimes drives the most profit too. So that's it's kind of a neat interaction that you get to see, and you get to see people that really care, and you also get to see people that do their jobs really, really well, and you try to help them ultimately drive that bottom line so they can keep doing what they're doing. Because I think from a Farm Bureau standpoint, in terms of how we care about our rural economies, we want our people to keep doing what they love doing. Not only because we care about our membership, but I think farmers are the best stewards of the land that's out there. Mm-hmm. I don't want other groups on that land because I know that our farmers and our producers are going to be the best there is in terms of taking care of that land, especially from a rural perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I just think it's nice to do good work for good people.
Absolutely.
I'm sure they give you plenty of grief about the Tennessee thing, but other than that, I'm sure they've been really gracious with you coming to Kentucky. So,
yeah, I was about to say for anyone that walks by my office, they've been very. I do have my Tennessee diploma hanging up, so they have.
And it is orange.
Patient.
I mean, it is gaudy orange.
It's orange. Yikes.
They don't dull that bad boy for the diploma.
They are patient. So they're very patient with me here. So, and it's a balance. I know I can't have, hey, could we maybe paint this wall orange. No, none of that. But yeah, it's been good. It's been a good balance.
The minute I hear Rocky Top, though, he's out of here.
Yeah, as soon as you walk in, it like triggers something.
And so there's certain things that we
I don't
know,
think that'd
like,
be allowed.
yeah, non-negotiables.
No, but one of my favorite parts with what Taylor does is you've got these big, impactful things. And as someone who's sat in econ classes, we've all sat in an econ class, and it just feels like it's these like phantom players in the sky that you'll never see and you'll never understand how. And so I always do appreciate you having a way of bringing what feels like just this giant topic and being like, no, Joe Farmer in whatever county that you feel like you're in the middle of nowhere, Kentucky. This is how it could actually affect your bottom line, or this is why you should care, instead of just saying, oh, look at what's happening. Turn on your TV. Don't you think that's crazy? That's one of my favorite parts, is finding a way to make it relate, which is what I think is really cool about all our jobs, too. Like, we have great people we work with, and we want to find ways to make their story relatable from a video side, their farming operation, the content we're bringing. We want to make it relatable, and I think that's incredibly important.
Right, and just meeting all the staff of Farm Bureau, you're seeing those really good people here also. Mm-hmm. You know, they all came. Most of them came from that world, and it's neat to work with those folks every day. So, speaking of right now, what's happening out on fields all over Kentucky? We're starting planting season. You know, when you're going into this time of year, you know, market wise, what are we seeing? What do producers need to be looking at? And what are you seeing out there? Yeah,
it's a really exciting time of year. Everybody's itching to get the crop in the ground. You're also seeing here in the state of Kentucky, you're seeing a lot of green grass too, which is awesome. So our cattle producers are getting very, very excited as well. It's a fun time of year. You see the trees blooming. For some people with the allergies, maybe not as fun, but yeah, no, it's certainly an exciting time of year. And so, one thing that when we think about planting season and we think about it from a market standpoint, one thing that you're starting to see a shift in the marketplace. All right, so you're starting to see a transition. So you remember the narrative that I talked about a little bit earlier. So let's think about for a second. Let's think about our grains and oilseeds markets. So corn and soybeans, for instance. Let's think about that. You're starting to see a transition in the marketplace where you're starting to see times of elevated price volatility. Okay, what exactly do I mean by that? Well, what you're starting to enter into is folks are putting their crop in the ground. All right, so when they get their crop in the ground, what do you need? You need good weather, right? You need things to be dry when they need to be dry, and then you need rain when you need rain. You don't need too much rain, but you need enough rain, okay? And you want it to be dry at certain times, but you don't want it to be too dry. Well, then you want heat, but you don't want too much heat. You know, so there's always these factors that are going in. So just as I've kind of brought up some of the factors at play, you start getting into markets where you have market participants that are going to try to determine that crop. And the way that plays out is the price fluctuations, all right? So maybe we're getting too much rain, okay? And then your price will fluctuate based off we're getting too much rain. Or maybe we're not getting enough, okay? Maybe the crop's looking really good. Maybe it's not looking as good. You get these weather markets, okay, where folks try to determine the crop based off the weather markets. And we're kind of entering into that time from a crop's perspective where you're having increased market volatility. And so I kind of want to shine a bit of light on the state of Kentucky and kind of for our producers that are getting out in the fields, and especially this time of year, there's a lot of crop that's being put in the ground. So when we think about our corn plantings, and so I want to reference kind of the time frame. The way the USDA tracks it is our corn plantings on the 5-year average. So week 18, our 18th week of the year, which is in that May time frame. So from a corn perspective, from a 5-year average, we're usually about 55% of our crop is in the ground on a 5-year average. Now in 2023, so last year, we actually had 66% of that crop in the ground. All right, so we're going to kind of talk a little bit about. As well, but from a soybean perspective, in week 18 of the year, 5-year average about 24% of the crops in the ground for soybeans. Last year, we're about 38%. So last year, we saw that we were actually beating out our 5-year average in terms of getting that crop in the ground. All right, so what does it really matter about kind of the pace at which we put the crop in the ground? Well, I'd like to draw our attention back just a little bit from a market standpoint to March. All right, so one of the reports that we got the prospective plantings report that comes out in March, all right? So our prospective planning report, it gives us an idea, all right, of some of our key commodities and how much we are going to plant. So I want us to keep in mind corn and soybeans, all right? So for corn, we had what the USD estimate was about 90 million acres of corn that we were going to plant this year. That's 5% down from last year, all right? From the soybean side, the estimate was 86.5 million acres, which is actually up 3% from last year. So let's think about, for our farmers that are out there listening, all right, makes sense, right? For seeing where corn prices have been, and then we're seeing soybean prices. Makes sense that the USDA would say, okay, from what we're getting from our producers out there, folks want to put more soybeans in than last year. We want to put less corn in, given some of the prices. So let's tie that back into what we just talked about with kind of last year's pace in terms of the crop that we're getting in the ground versus some of the expectations of this year. We had a great crop in many places last year. All right, we were actually able to get that crop in the ground. Turns out that crop on the back end came out really well for corn and soybeans. All right, so one thing to keep in mind is we have this year corn acres down, soybean acres up relative to last year. But one thing that the American producer loves to plant is corn. All right, we love planting corn. And so one thing that we might see with these warmer conditions around planting time, the ideal conditions, we might potentially see more corn go in the ground than what the USDA the outlook is. And so for our farmers that are listening now that are thinking about how much corn versus beans they want to put in, it'd be interesting to see what they're thinking right now. But one thing that we might see, especially as we start moving through the year, is we might see a little more corn in the ground if some of these ideal conditions arise, and folks can have more days in the field and longer days in the field. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind, kind of where we're at in terms of the year. You know, this is the time of year that our producers are itching. They're itching to get out and get to work. So
it is interesting. This year we've planting season. It's so funny. The cattle guys have been not wanting mud while we're calving, February, March, and then our crop guys are. They take all the mud they need right then. They want to be able to, as long as we hold out the dry so we can plant. Right. But it is so interesting, this planting season so far. I feel like when it's rained, you've been knocked out for a couple days. But then we've been having good wind and drying it out and getting them right back in there with high enough temperatures. So I'm with you. It's hard to not want to put more corn in the ground. I mean, You just hear it from guys, and when they know, especially my wheat guys out west, they know those are going to go double cropped with beans anyway. So a lot of that time, that early planting, it's hard to not want to put more corn in the ground. It really is.
Mm-hmm. You're exactly right, and I think that could be something when we think about the data last year. We think about in terms of moving earlier and getting and outpacing some of our average, and by what I mean is getting more of that crop in the ground relative to where we were in the 5-year average last year. We had a lot of corn that we planted. Now, granted, we had very favorable prices, so that's the factor that we don't want to leave out. Okay, it was a much favorable price scenario last year, but with that being said, that's kind of the challenge. We like growing corn if the conditions reveal themselves, so much so that we can, like I said, have those longer days in the field, have more days in the field where we're working. It'll be interesting to see what our crop for this planting year turns out to be. Yeah.
How do other aspects, inflation, job markets, and even we spoke before the podcast, conflict outside of our country, around the world, how do those kinds of things affect the markets and those kind of, speak to that a little?
Yeah, that's a great question. One way that we can think about markets, and this kind of goes back, I referenced it a little bit early, is this idea of thinking about markets holistically, okay? It's easy for us. We raise cattle, or we raise hogs, or we raise chickens, we grow corn, soybeans, and wheat. So that's what we think about. That's our product, okay? And so that's what we care about. But when we think about the agriculture commodities sector, it's actually just a sliver of a broader marketplace, okay? And what I mean by broader marketplace is it's prices that are available for market participants to step in and to profit is one way to think about it. So you have producers and you have end users. You have these folks that hedge in the market. So we think about something like Yum, for instance. Yum wanted to move in and wanted to secure supply at a certain price that they knew would be beneficial for their franchisees. Okay, producers. They take their product to the market, and some of them will hedge prior to, some will take the price that's at the elevator. Okay, it's a way for them to get their supply off their hands and get a price. All right. What you also have is you have another factor at play in the markets, which is controversial, which are market speculators. These are individuals who don't touch the product, don't see the product, but they are able to participate in these markets and capture some of the volatility that's there in order to profit, okay, or lose money as well. And so one thing that these speculators do is they provide liquidity to these markets, all right? So they provide opportunity for those who want to participate. For every buyer, there needs to be a seller, okay? And so with the additional liquidity, all right, provides opportunity for those who participate in these markets, all right? So a little bit of a rambling there, a long way to say that we think about these markets holistically. We think about some of these speculators in these markets. What I referenced in the beginning is they have a market narrative. What's going on in stocks? What's going on in bonds? Okay. What's going on in energies markets? What's going on in metals markets? What's going on in ag markets? And so when we think about something like inflation, let's take inflation for a second. It's been a hot topic since the start of 2023, and even really after COVID. I mean, we were focused in on it. And excuse me, so I said 2023. What I meant was to say 2022. So we really saw inflation ramp up after the Russia invasion of Ukraine. Okay, so we saw really inflation kind of ramp up during that 2022 period. All right, and really has flowed since then. Okay, and so this inflation interest rate discussion has been what so many people have been focusing on. Now, why does that matter for agriculture commodities? All right, we're talking about inflation, right? So it's what I pay for my groceries, right? You know, it's what's going on with used cars. You know, why do I care about what I'm selling corn at? Well, one thing that these investors or some of these market speculators, they don't work to produce these products, but what they do view these products, things like oil, for instance, and things like corn and soybeans, is they oftentimes view these products as a hedge against inflation. So if we think about that, what exactly does that mean is that if I go to the grocery store and all of a sudden my beef's more expensive or my pork's more expensive, or let's say I'm buying something like a corn oil. Let's say my corn oil is more expensive for what I cook with. Well, there's a raw material, all right, that is oftentimes and is more expensive. So as you move through the supply chain, right, those costs have to be passed on, okay? So when you think about the products at your grocery store, for instance, those high prices, they got to start somewhere. Mm-hmm. They often start on the farm, okay? And so from an investor standpoint, why in the world does inflation matter? Why do interest rates matter? What interest rates matter to operating loans, things like that? I mean, we think about when we finance, but when we think about something like inflation, why does it matter? Well, if I'm an investor in the market and I know that inflation is going to stay high, all right, well, chances are I know that's probably because it flows through on the commodity side. So I want to offset that risk, okay, or the loss that I might have in my purchasing power from an inflationary side with the gains that I'll receive because crude oil is higher, all right, or maybe corn prices or soybean prices rally. So I'm able to offset that risk, or I'm also able to take profit in one area where I might experience loss in another. So that's one way to kind of think about a holistic market, and a holistic market narrative allows you to kind of put these pieces together in these marketplaces and understand that it truly is. The ags is a part of a global market space and a key player in it.
Yeah, we were laughing the other day. Job reports came out and inflation's high and all these things, but what's killing my husband is our interest rate is high. And so for us young farmers, and you'll hear me reference my husband a lot on this show, it's tough because for a lot of your young farmers are the ones that have operating loans, and most farms will have an operating loan, but those are the ones that are really going, they don't have maybe the reserve ready for a bad year. So when you're paying a little more for your cattle like we are, and then your interest rate's a little higher, for us as we start to learn, we're looking ahead, hoping it's going down this year, and it didn't. So it's been a really neat learning curve. Not fun on the pocketbook, but a learning curve nonetheless. So that's what I think is so interesting, is figuring out, not just being angry about what happened, but understanding why it happened, so you can maybe price protect, risk manage, all of the hot topic words that us farmers are tired of maybe hearing at the extension meeting. They pretty well ring true when something like this happens. All the guys were preaching the good news on interest rates going into 24, and then we get one report and things change. So I think it's really interesting, and I connected Taylor, my husband, just to talk about just that the other day. So it's interesting just to hear and understand why it makes protecting your investment that much more important when you think.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's actually one of the reasons why our commodities division, that's why we want to operate in this space on a weekly basis. So we'll get into the reports and the things that we roll out later, but that's why we really want to be active in this space on a weekly basis, as well as just from a member benefit side, be available for our members, because Renee and I, we had this conversation, and we started this year out from an interest rates perspective. We were looking at 6 rate cuts, roughly, going into this year. A lot of excitement in markets. We really saw what we saw on the back end of 2023, as we saw the job numbers fall really when we were in October, November, December. Well, I should say more so October and November. We really saw those job numbers acting like we thought they may. Soften up a little bit from some of the highs. We also saw inflation follow suit, okay? So we actually saw some of those, you saw that inflation slow a little bit, okay? But one thing, and so with that being said, okay, when we say the job numbers slow a little bit, kind of fall in with estimates and kind of where we were pre-COVID, all right? And the inflation slows, all right? The thought is, all right, let's see if we can cut back on the rates. The rates don't have to be so high, and it kind of falls into this discussion that we're having of a soft landing. Is kind of where we can work our way out of this high inflation scenario. We can have it slow a little bit, all right? The jobs market doesn't have to take a huge hit, all right? We can kind of wean ourselves inflation while keeping jobs relatively strong, all right? We'll have that soft landing. We can kind of go back to dropping the rates. So that's why when we entered the new year, okay, we saw the situation where, okay, looking like rate cuts are in play. And then now we flash forward and we've seen inflation heat back up, okay, and we've seen really strong job numbers, all right. And so now as we enter into the summer months, where typically we see inflation pick up with things like gas prices. So really, from a gas price perspective, pulled some numbers here. So since the week of March 4th of 2024, U.S. average gas prices for regular fuel has risen from $3.35 a gallon to $3.59 a gallon. Okay, kind of entering a period that's inflationary because more people are driving. Gas prices are higher. These types of things that we pay for are increasing. All right. So then you start getting to a situation where at the beginning of the year, interest rates are coming down. Now we're looking at markets are pricing in roughly 2, at most 3 rate cuts for 2024. A drastic change. And that goes back to, and this is something that we talk about often in the commodities division, okay? One thing that we as farmers love to do is what? We love to produce. We love to grow our products, all right? We love to be around our cattle. We love to grow good crops. All right, we love to manage the risks that are in our operation. But what is equally as important is understanding the price risks that are out there, understanding the market risks that we are exposed to as well. That's often something that's not as fun to think about. That's not what I don't know that anybody gets into farming because they love to deal with the fluctuation in corn price. But it's something that's there nonetheless. And so that's from the commodities division. That's where we really want to step in and on a weekly basis be able to interact with our folks here in the state to say, hey, here is why we're seeing in terms of interest rates, here's why we're seeing our rates continue to stay where they're at, not being cut, okay? And we also want to talk about what does inflation, what did diesel fuel prices, what are we expecting here in the months ahead? What are some of the volatility? These types of questions, we want to be here to serve our members in that space, because while we love to talk about the products, we're, at the end of the day, we're entrepreneurs. That's what a farmer is.
Right.
It's an entrepreneur. It's someone who has their business and who sells their product, okay? And so we have to think about not only the product, but we think about the risk that is there from a price perspective and making sure that we are as profitable as possible.
Right. Great segue to resources. You're a resource, a human resource from the commodity division, but also what are some other resources? I'm a farmer, I'm a member. What are some resources? What can I sign up for? Where can I get more Taylor Thompson in a way?
Oh, man. Oh, yeah. That might have selling it that way might send folks running the other way.
Go away.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. No. But for people who are interested, our commodities division, we have really, especially in this new year, I think, and Renee can probably speak to this a little bit just as a part of the team, we have a full team now. And it's been really cool to see the collaboration that's within the division. And we're working really hard to provide as much value to as broad a base as possible. We care about our producers at any level. Whether you do corn or cut flowers, I think we really care about our membership. And so when it comes to resources, we have several reports, which I'll speak about briefly. But what I'll mention first off is that we are a member benefit for those who are members of the Kentucky Farm Bureau, and what that means is that you have access to us, and we are constantly working from our side to provide beneficial material, but also to be available for our members, so that if you reach out to us, that if we can answer your question, we are happy to do so. If we don't know the answer, we're happy to try to pass you off to somebody we believe has the right answer. But the biggest thing is that we're a member benefit, that we want to be available for our folks here in the state. And so what are some of the ways? So to your question, what are some of the ways that we're trying to do this, that we're trying to be proactive? So we've got a number of reports that we roll out as a part of the commodities division, as well as our government affairs team. And so to start off, one thing that a lot of our members have been aware of for a while is our cash grain bids. So essentially, what we do is we take elevators throughout the state, we take their cash grain bids, and we send that out daily. All right, gives you an idea of where prices are at today and the basis that are available throughout the state. Additionally, we have started an economic report. Now, this comes out on Mondays. These are reports that I do. And so what these are just brief one-pagers with just some things to think about throughout the week. And as much as this tool is meant to inform, or this report is meant to inform, one thing is that it's also there if you have questions. If you have things that you're thinking about when you get these reports, all right, these are ways, an avenue to have a talking point, reach out, contact. Let's talk about these things further. There's only so much you can put in one page, but just some things to keep an eye out for, some things to be thinking about. Because when it comes to markets, by the second, there is no shortage of things to consider. But what the economic report really aims to do is just maybe areas that our folks can direct their thoughts in terms of some of the risks that are in the market or some of the opportunity that's there. All right, it's just to talk about those things, but also just to relay, hey, these are the things that I'm kind of thinking about. All right.
That's my big joke, is it's Taylor's brain on a Monday morning, and I force him to put it on one page. You got to make it digestible on one page, and then that's what I tell everybody. I said, if it doesn't make sense, he wants the phone call, he wants the questions, because it's just Monday morning thoughts of Taylor Thompson's economic brain.
Yeah.
And we put it on paper, and he wants to get you thinking and on your couch, in your truck, wherever you are, to get a chance to get that ding on your email and read it.
And that's the thing, too. I'm always looking to learn. Reach out. That's the thing. Reach out, teach me something. That's the way. That's the way that we want it to be. We want it to be interaction and discussion. And like I said, there's any number of things that are going on. Reach out, and we want that engagement at that level. But that's kind of the focal point of our economic reports. And then I'll transition to a collaborative effort between Donovan Pigg, who is our livestock marketing specialist, and myself. And so this report is a weekly cattle report. So we take KDA. They have their weekly market report that really covers all of the Kentucky cattle auctions throughout the state. So what we do is we take that report, and it, in a sense, is disaggregated. So we really try to pull that information together, and we try to, by class, so for instance, 5-weight steers, 6-weight heifer, cull cows. What we try to do is, at each class, at each level, we try to give a weighted average price. So what we do is we take a weighted average price for each class for that week, get an idea of ballpark where prices are trading on the weighted average level. We also do the same for our value add cattle, okay? So we get a value add number too. And one thing that's really unique about our report, number one, is our aim is for it to be concise, straightforward. When you read it, you know where to go, you know what to look for. It's easy, anybody could read it, and anybody can take from it what we want them to take from it. Number two is we add that unique value add component where we really give you a value add number. So one thing that we hope to show is for our folks that are having those in that value add space and adding that value to their cattle is the premium that's in the market for those cattle. And so that's really something that's unique about our report is it's a concise value add number along with that weighted average number. So the overarching goal is for it to be a quick and easy read. You can get an idea where markets are for that week, for the previous week is what it would be. And as you're starting to think about how you can market your cattle. And so that's really our third in terms of the economic report, but we also have, as a part of the job form, which will be available in some of our in the resources page following the podcast, is the legislative reports. And these are reports from our government affairs team. And so in terms of what's going on in Kentucky, especially this time of year with everything that's going on in Frankfort, it's just a way to keep our members updated. And so I won't speak to that as much. I'll save that for maybe some later guests that you all will have. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's an idea of what we're trying to do and being proactive in getting information out to our membership, things to think about, but also at the same time being available, ask questions, make comments. We want to be there to serve our folks.
For sure, yeah, and just like Taylor said, those will be in the show notes. I think is what we call them. We're new to podcasting. We're gonna learn all this terminology, so we're gonna definitely put those there. The website will also have some resources. I will go ahead and say the Farm Bureau website as a whole on the Federation side is going to take a little rehaul lately. A lot of new faces looking at it. So if you've ever tuned in, keep checking in on us for the next few months. Mm-hmm. We're going to make things easier and a little more streamlined, and the commodities page is one of those places. But I want to take a minute. Just thank you, Taylor. This has been great. We appreciate you being here, and I hope you've enjoyed spending a little time with us talking it all out.
It's been great. Yes, Matt, Renee, thank you very much. I've really enjoyed it, and as you all are going on this podcast journey, I wish you the absolute best.
Yes, I've learned a lot today. This is you're definitely in a wheelhouse I'm not used to. So, but I learned a lot today, and I really appreciate your time and really what you do for us here at Farm Bureau and the farmers in Kentucky. I think it's certainly information they're interested in on a daily basis. I think the work you're doing is great. So appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Taylor. And thank you, listeners, for joining. Make sure and subscribe to our larger podcast, The Farm Life, to catch our next episode. See you next time on Between the Rows.